You can read, you can read, you can read, you can read. Yes, indeed, you can read, you can read. You can read, you can read, you'll succeed. You can read, take the lead. You can read, you can read.
So this week I wanted to do something a little bit different. Rather than reviewing a movie, I thought instead I'd take the opportunity to bring you all a little slice of my childhood instead. In part because trying to find information about the series I'm going to be talking about today has been a multi-year long process, and in part because there isn't really anywhere on the internet that specifically talks about this series, and I feel by putting all of the elements together here, based on what information I could find, I've somewhat centralised everything in one place. So, You Can Read was a series of edutainment VHS tapes released one a month throughout 1988, alongside a magazine of the same name. The premise of the series was to help teach very young children the absolute basics of learning to read through various songs, cartoons, and real-life examples, building into a complete library of 12 magazines and tapes. Each tape would be framed around a relatively simple premise, be it family, birthdays, animals, or playing games. As a child, I had at least 2 of these tapes: Birthday Parties, which was Volume 2, and Me, which was Volume 3. They form what was effectively some of my earliest memories of watching videotapes, and I'm about 90% certain that they almost certainly contributed to me having ADHD. But we'll get to why a little bit later. In the UK, the magazine series wasn't a particularly massive hit. I believe it had 2 runs, an initial run where the tapes were in boxes, and a reprint version where the tapes were in carton sleeves. And it would appear that for its US, Australian and possibly New Zealand release, I've found some evidence to suggest it made it over there, but nothing concrete, the magazine was dropped altogether. In fact, it's implied from what I can find that they were largely marketed to schools and parents directly as a mail order thing. As mentioned, as a child I owned 2 of these, and then my parents threw them out. And I spent the better half of 2.5 decades occasionally having the equivalent of PTSD-induced acid flashbacks to strange sequences I was sure I'd seen before, but were completely unable to recollect. In particular, a scene with a somewhat muted and uncomfortably creepy mime miming to a narrator singing a song was stuck in my head for the longest period of time and was heavily influential to pretty much every creative venture I've ever made. It's still an inspiration to me even to this day. It was only by chance one night in 2013 when I'd had a few beverages and was in the weird part of YouTube that I stumbled on an extract from one of the episodes. It wasn't one I remembered, I believe it was from Volume 5, Space, but once you hear that theme, you better goddamn believe it is not leaving your head anytime soon. And as soon as I heard the familiar
You can read
beginning, I remembered it all as if part of my brain had just been unlocked and the repressed memories came flooding back. I knew what I was looking for, but now I needed to actually find it. At the time, rather naively, I had assumed someone on YouTube must have uploaded more, but they hadn't. In fact, apart from 1 or 2 stray low-resolution clips, there was nothing. I tried to see if any of the original tapes were for sale on Amazon or eBay. No luck there either. Finally, after weeks of on and off searching, I decided to just plough through Google and read anything I could find about it. And I was led on something of a wild goose chase. First and foremost, there is a rival series that was also released on VHS called You Can Read Phonics. It has absolutely nothing to do with You Can Read. It's American and came out about a decade after the You Can Read series that I was looking for. This caused me quite a few problems, as many of the companies and websites that I contacted over this had items listed on their website as You Can Read, but with some probing it was revealed that they actually had this latter series and not the former. The only lead I gathered through all of this was that there was an Australian educational provider that claimed to have the original You Can Read series as part of its roster of educational materials for sale. However, after multiple attempts to contact them and with no response, the trail had run relatively cold. But I knew the name of the series at least, which was all I needed to keep an eye out. Skip forward to 2017 and once again the beverages were flowing and something triggered a memory of my attempts to find the series a few years prior. So I hit YouTube again to see if anything had changed. And it had. All 12 episodes of the series had been uploaded by YouTube user Tom Archer. The quality wasn't up to much, glorious 240p, but for the first time that I knew of, the whole series was accounted for. I immediately downloaded the lot and made copies, including burning a DVD version, purely to ensure that I'd be able to keep them. I watched through a few of them, had a good laugh, and then went to bed. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to own one of these tapes. I wanted to have that bit of nostalgia back. I wanted better quality at minimum. So I kept an eye out on eBay. Occasionally, tapes would turn up lumped in with a few dozen sell-through kids' tapes as part of job lots for ridiculous money. Occasionally, you'd get the odd chancer who'd try to flog one for a price it wasn't worth. And occasionally, I'd just miss my chance to jump on a copy. I tried on and off through 2017 and 2018, until finally, in 2019, I managed to grab one. I'd managed to grab not only an original run tape, but I'd managed to effectively buy back one of the tapes I had when I was a kid. I'd bought Volume 3, Me. And as soon as it turned up, I was blown away by a mixture of nostalgia and utter confusion. There are no credits on You Can Read. There are no listings on the box for actors, camera people, editors, directors, or producers. The tape starts, does its thing, tells you what's coming next month, and then stops. And in many ways, what's the saddest part in all this is that I'll never know who on earth curated this madness. This is quite possibly one of the most hyperactive messes I've ever sat through. Shots cut seemingly at random at double speed, and I can confirm, having now watched tapes I never saw as a kid, it's genuinely completely unknown as to what the tapes are going to cut to next. In Me, we cut from learning about what to order at McDonald's, to learning what to buy in a supermarket, to directions in drive-in, and it just gets more random from there. The music throughout is competent but cheap-sounding, and the style of animation, hand-drawn stills that have been digitally moved around the image, while not unusual, is just a bit oddly done when juxtaposed with scenes where the animations don't move to live-action sequences. I mentioned that this series arguably contributed to my ADHD, and if the editing of this series is anything to go by, then I'm absolutely justified in my assertion of this. Particularly at the beginning and the end of the tape. There's barely a sequence that runs for longer than 4 beats. It's relentlessly throwing images at your eyes, and quite how this was supposed to teach your child how to read when words float past the screen at speeds faster than the screen can process them is anyone's guess. Marrying up this furious editing with the sheer cramming of content creates a roughly 25-minute experience that feels a bit like watching 6 films in 60 seconds. As mentioned, the theme tune is manic. Absolutely manic. And the visual styles of this series change with every tape. So it's quite a treat going into each of these literally not knowing what was going to pop out on the other side. The mime scene I mentioned earlier on was a little bit of a letdown, in all honesty. Don't get me wrong, the creepiness is still very much there, as is the unsettling feeling that comes with having effectively a clown stood in what might as well be the ether, staring directly down the barrel of the camera lens at you. And as the series progressed, there was only stranger sights to behold. Personally, I'm quite glad I didn't have Tape 5 Space as a kid, as the puppet alien would have probably scarred me for life emotionally. That's another issue with this series if I put down my nostalgia goggles for a second. The consistency. From what I can see, these tapes come in 2 flavours. Animation-driven and live-action driven. With the former being a tape that consists mainly of animated sing-alongs interspersed with the occasional live-action segment, often establishing shots of London or silent music-dubbed studio-based sequences, and the latter being driven more by puppets or the narrator within a live-action environment. Tape 4, Family, is a good example of this, with it mainly being focused on a live-action family. It would have been nice to see a balance across the entire series, but because of this swing it means that some tapes end up coming off worse than others. With Volume 2 Birthday Parties looking something like it was made in 1984, let alone 1988, and others like Space looking like something that could have easily been made in the early mid-90s. As there isn't even a credit list or even an IMDb listing for this series, it's almost impossible to tell whether these tapes were produced fresh or whether they were made up of mostly recycled stock footage material. I personally believe that this is mostly original recorded work, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was recycled stock footage from somewhere in the world. Equally, trying to source the magazines for this series has proven near impossible, and other than 1 or 2 photos I've found on Google of them, I'd have been inclined to say they don't even exist. I have no idea what they would have been about in either situation, as the tapes don't really leave a lot of wiggle room to spin off an activity-based magazine. You Can Read was released on VHS in 1988 by Orbis Video. It was originally created by TV3 for the company Good Parent Limited. Orbis is a long-dead video release label. There's a modern company called Orbis International, but I don't believe they're the same business. TV3 Productions was an Irish film production company who also seem to have more or less disappeared. Their last known whereabouts that I can place is an article published online in 1998 claiming that they were going to be investing a lot more of their funding and time into independent productions. Other than that though, there's nothing. And it won't come as a surprise to learn that the Good Parenting Company don't exist anymore either. Well, at least that I can see. Whether all of these companies have simply rebranded or whether they've been long closed, I couldn't say. Which is a shame, as I'd have loved to have better understood exactly what these companies were doing in the late 80s and early 90s, and exactly what led to their closure. There's never been a DVD release of this series, nor has there ever been a Blu-ray one, because why would there be? There'd be literally no point. Other than keeping me happy. Though if anyone out there has any more information about this series out there, please leave a comment down below, as I'd love to know as much as possible about this series. Fuck my hat, I didn't know that. This is an interesting turn of events in the world of obscure low-budget 80s children's edutainment. Quite frankly, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but in 2016 the original run of You Can Read was listed for reissue on DVD in monthly publications with their original magazines reprinted. Trying to find information about this reprinting is scarce because it hasn't been reissued in the UK, nor has it been reissued in the US or Australia, or even New Zealand. You Can Read has been reissued for DVD and magazine release in Malta. Why in God's name it's been re-released in a country that never had it originally is anyone's guess. But yeah, You Can Read is back. I contacted Miller Publishing and Distributors, the company who are currently alleged to be distributing the re-release, and they confirmed, first of all, that yes, this was absolutely true and that they did have a full set of magazines and DVDs for sale through their company website. They also sold them in newsstands around Malta. The downside was that I live in the UK, and with combined postage of sending for a complete set, it would come to a grand total of £135 for the privilege. So in that regard, this re-release might as well not exist. Though if anyone out there who watches these reviews regularly happens to live around or near Malta and wants to help a guy out, please do get in touch, as I'd be very interested in seeing what exactly these things are. Anyway, let's go to the wrap-up. You Can Read wasn't a revolutionary series. If I stop being nostalgic, I'd argue that it probably isn't even a good series. But I have a lot to thank these tapes for, despite the ADD I potentially got from the whiplash editing. The imagery it introduced me to has stuck with me right into adulthood and has directly inspired my creative choices. I'd probably be leading a quite different life if I hadn't seen these tapes at the impressionable age that I did. So in many ways they're invaluable to me. They're probably not to everyone's taste, but I'd highly recommend just watching one. If only for the absolute earworms you're likely to inherit just through sitting through one tape. They're all very short, clocking in at approximately 25 to 30 minutes per volume, and I can definitely say they aren't a waste of time. I still dig them out to this day every now and then, so with them all being available on YouTube, I hope you find joy in them the same way that I did.